What's going on, everybody? Well, we're finally here. The final part of me ranking every single Seinfeld episode. This is part 11. Finally, we are at the top 10 Seinfeld episodes of all time. I got to tell you, this is maybe the most fun I've ever had these past 10 or 11 weeks, watching every episode of the series. There's no, even the bad episodes, a bad episode of Seinfeld is better than almost any other TV show. It has been so much fun. I'm actually going to do it again. I'm going to probably do The Office next, which is going to be a pretty huge undertaking. So who knows how long that's going to take. But anyway, let's get into it. The top 10 episodes of Seinfeld all time. Here we go. Number 10, The Outing from season 4. A prank by Elaine leads a newspaper journalist to think Jerry and George are gay. This is the episode that was made famous by the phrase, not that there's anything wrong with that. I kept saying that all the guys like, oh, they think we're gay. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I remember this is one of those episodes at the time, just thinking it was the funniest thing ever, the way that they kept bringing this up. When the reporter is in Jerry's apartment and interviewing him, and she thinks that they're gay, and he and George are there, and Jerry figures out that she thinks they're gay, and they're like, no, it was a joke, and Jerry says, I mean, I have many gay friends, and George says, my father is gay. For some reason, that's to me that was one of the funniest things ever. And then it just snowballs from there. The article gets picked up by some big newspaper and it goes national or something like that, and it's Jerry's birthday, so George gets him a tickets to Guys and Dolls, and he says, isn't that a lavish Broadway musical? And George says, it's Guys and Dolls, not Guys and Guys. Yeah, it was I think it was just so well done and funny. And then there was a thing with George dating someone who he wanted to drop, and he couldn't. He said he said if he was a porno actor, his name would be Buck Naked. But he tells her, so Jerry finally gets it straightened with the reporter that he's not gay, but George wants to keep it the ruse going because he wants to try to dump his girlfriend, and he says, I'm gay, I'm a gay man, I'm very gay, extraordinarily gay, steeped in gayness. So funny. The Outing, number 10. Number 9, the Merv Griffin Show from season 9. After Kramer rescues the set of the old Merv Griffin Show from a dumpster, he sets it up in his apartment where he interviews anyone who happened to drop by. George's new girlfriend gives him a hard time after he strikes a pigeon with his car. A new guy at the office is driving Elaine crazy. Jerry has a new girlfriend who inherited a fabulous collection of classic toys from her late father, but she won't let Jerry touch them, let alone play with them. Normally, especially the Jerry plot of him drugging his girlfriend so he could play with her toys, to me, that in previous episodes where something ridiculous like that happened, that just way across the line, I would give this negative consideration. But the whole plot of the whole Merv Griffin Show is maybe the most absurd thing that's ever happened on this in all of Seinfeld. So it just elevates it above everything else. But yeah, Jerry drugging a woman to play with his toys is horrible. The whole thing with George and the pigeon and the squirrel and doing surgery on the squirrel, that was horrible. And there was some guy that he was a sidler, and he would always like end up next to Elaine or something like that. Really, really stupid. But yeah, the whole Merv Griffin Show, the way that Kramer treated that as the host and kept that going, and it was just amazing. So that whole concept, there wasn't too many great quotes or scenes or anything, just the whole episode of everything revolving the Merv Griffin Show was just top notch, just amazing. Number 8, the chicken roaster from season 8. Kenny Rogers Roasters sets up shop across the street from Jerry and Kramer's apartments. Their large chicken sign causes problems for everyone Kramer and Jerry end up switching apartments and personalities. Elaine gets comfortable as president of the catalog, but is accused of abusing the company credit card. And George buys an expensive hat and leaves it in a girlfriend's apartment to hope to score another date. The George thing, yeah, thinking that he'll just irritate his way into becoming a boyfriend or something like that. He says, what's the difference? You know the way I work. I'm like a commercial jingle. First it's a little irritating, then you hear it a few times, then you hum it in the shower. By the third day it's by Menon Costanza. Okay, whatever. But what really makes this episode is Kramer and Jerry basically switching personalities. Kramer does a great job. Michael Richards does a great job as pretending to be Jerry, but Jerry being Kramer is amazing. I usually accuse Jerry Seinfeld of being a horrible actor. He basically smirks or laughs his way through every single scene, but he was really good being Kramer in this. So that whole thing of just him being Kramer just elevates this above a lot of things. So yeah, and then so Kramer gets hooked on the Kenny Rogers Roasters chicken, and he can't tell Jerry that, so he has Newman get the chicken for him. But then Jerry catches him, and he catches him ordering broccoli, and he suspects something, and Newman says, no, the broccoli's for me. And then Jerry says, oh, well, then why don't you eat some? And he's like, no, vile weed. I love how Newman said that. No, and Elaine has to go to Burma, and they do this whole Apocalypse Now parody where Jay Peterman is in Burma, or Myanmar, if you want to say, and yeah, he says, you're an errand girl sent by grocery clerks to collect the bill. It's a parody of Apocalypse Now. Number 7, the abstinence from season 8. Abstinence allows George to become a genius, but it turns Elaine into an idiot. Jerry gets bumped from career day at his old junior high school, and Kramer turns his apartment into a smoking lounge, and all the smoke disfigures the face. I gotta tell you, if this easily could have been number 1, that's how good this episode is. The concept that a guy thinks about sex all the time, and when he doesn't have to think about sex, then he automatically becomes smarter because all that brain power is now being used on something else. I gotta tell you, it's pretty accurate. I don't know how it is with women, but it's accurate. Let's just say that. Such an amazing plot, and the way it's executed is so funny that George just becomes exponentially smarter by the minutes because he's not thinking about sex. It's amazing. It is just such a wonderful premise. I love when he's in Jerry's apartment and Jeopardy is playing, and he just knows every single answer to Jeopardy. He's like, what is tungsten or wolfram? And then he is in Monks, and he's poring over all these books. He says, of course, absolute zero. And Elaine comes in and says, what's with all these books? And he just says, I stopped having sex. There is that scene with George and 2 of the Yankees, Derek Jeter and Bernie Williams, and he's teaching them how to hit, and he's just hitting home run after home run because he's so smart now. And he says he's giving them all these hitting tips, and Derek Jeter says, but we won the World Series. And George is in 6 games. Oh, classic line. Was still one of the great scenes of the series. The thing with Kramer was really good too. But the scene with Jerry where actually they had to do many takes because Jerry could not stop laughing, and I don't blame him. It's just such a silly, great scene. Jerry says, it's from all that smoke. You've experienced a lifetime of smoking in 72 hours. What did you expect? Well, emphysema, birth defects, cancer, but not this. Jerry, my face is my livelihood, my allure, my twinkle, everything I have that I owe to this face. And he says, look away, I'm hideous. Hey, I lose it every time too. And Elaine becoming dumber because she withholds sex from her boyfriend, who is trying to become a doctor. She's in the apartment, and she says, I need a 4-letter word, Winnie the, and he says poo, and she's like, poo. I'm sorry. And then Kramer takes his case. He wants to sue the tobacco company, so he gets Jackie Childs. This is the cherry on top of the sundae of this episode, and he's telling him that he needs that he smokes so much and he needs to sue the tobacco companies, which is funny because in real life that actor's name is Philip Morris. But so he says, so Jackie, do we have a case? And Jackie Childs says, your face is my case. Love that. And they're in with it. They're talking to the tobacco company, and the lady says, I disagree. I think, in fact, Mr. Kramer projects a rugged masculinity. And Jackie Childs says, rugged? The man's goblin. And then at the end of the scene, Jackie Childs says, Jack is cashing in on your wretched disfigurement. And then at the end, Kramer makes a deal, and he looks like the Marlboro Man on a billboard or something like that. And Jackie Childs says, this is the most public yet of my many humiliations. I love anything with Jackie Childs. So good. Number 6, the marine biologist from season 5. My God. Again, especially these 7 episodes, easily all could have been number 1. They're just so good. George starts dating a college friend who thinks that Jerry thinks George is now a marine biologist. Elaine's electronic organizer injures a person after being launched from a limo by a Russian novelist, and Kramer decides to golf on the beach. There are so many good lines and good scenes in this. First, there's Jerry telling Elaine, he said, you know what the most unbelievable thing about Tolstoy is the other day? You know, the original title for War and Peace was War, What Is It Good For? So funny. So he meets this college friend at the ATM, and he makes up that George is a marine biologist. And she's like, really? He's like, yeah, he's specializing in whales. He's working on lowering the cholesterol level in whales. All that blubber, quite unhealthy. You know, it's the largest mammal on Earth, but as George says, they don't have to be. I love that line. Then he tells George that, yeah, I met her, and George is so happy because he had such a crush on her. But he says, oh, by the way, I told her you were a marine biologist. And George says, why couldn't you have made me an architect? You know, I always wanted to pretend I was an architect. I love that. And then he's talking to her over the phone. I don't know why this line kills him. He says, algae, obviously plankton. I don't know what else to say. I love that line so much. So he meets her in person, and they're on the beach. And then another one of the great lines, I'm pretty sure this was said by Larry David off camera. He says, is anyone here a marine biologist? Every time every time I post that, I say, does anyone here a marine biologist? People think that I'm actually asking for a marine biologist. Like, no, it's a Seinfeld thing. And then one of the greatest scenes possibly in the entire series, I know I've said this many times, and maybe I'll do a ranking of the greatest scenes of Seinfeld, is George in the diner with everyone, telling them what happened because there was a beached whale, what happened next. And of course, the line he starts, the sea was angry that day, my friends, like an old man trying to return soup in a deli. Again, this is famous and one of the greatest scenes. He says, I got about 50 feet out, and then suddenly the great beast appeared before me. I tell you, he was 10 stories high if he was a foot. As if sensing my presence, he gave out a big bellow. I said, easy, big fella. Again, just so classic. And And then as I was watching him struggling, I realized something was obstructing his breathing. From there I was standing, I could see directly into the great eye of the eye of the great fish. And Jerry says, mammal, whatever. And then from out of nowhere, a huge tidal wave lifted, tossed like a cork, and I found myself on top of him face to face with the blowhole. I could barely see from all the waves crashing on top of me, but I knew something was there. So I reached out my hand and I pull out the obstruction. It was a Titleist. and at this point, the audience is just dying laughing. And it was such a great scene. And apparently it was like a last minute thing that Jason Alexander just, memorized just like that, because he's awesome. And the look on Kramer's face was amazing too. And he says, was that a Titleist? And George nods. And he says, well, because it was a hole in one. Perfect, classic. So good. Another one that easily could have been number one. Number 5, The Fire from season 5. George dates a woman who has a son, and she invites him to the boy's birthday party. At the party, a fire breaks out in the kitchen, and George screams fire and knocks down the kids and an old lady as he makes his cowardly escape. Toby heckles Jerry, and Jerry gets a negative review of the show, so he decides to do something, heckle the heckler. He goes to Toby's office where the heckling upsets her, and she rushes out of the building, and a street sweeper severs her pinky toe. Toby is one of the great one episode characters ever in Seinfeld. She's great. She's really great. That whole thing with Toby and the pinky and heckling, or just not heckling Jerry. Well, she was having, she was just really loud, and then heckling, just great. But then when she severs her pinky toe and Kramer rescues it, and the way he tells a story, oh man, that is another one of the great scenes in the entire series. He says, this guy pulls out a gun. Well, I knew any delay is going to cost her the pinky toe, so I got out of the seat. I started walking toward him. He says, where do you think you're going, Cracker Jack? I said, well, I got a little prize for you, buddy. Boom, and I knocked out cold. Then everyone is screaming because of the driver. He's passed out from all the commotion. The bus is out of control. So I grab him by the collar. I take him out of the seat. I get behind the wheel. Now I'm driving the bus. And George says, you're Batman. Oh my God, you're Batman. He's like, yeah, I'm Batman. Then the mugger who comes too, he's just choking me. So I'm fighting him off with one hand. I keep driving the bus with the other hand because the manager opened the door and I kicked him out with my foot. And at the next stop, and George says, you made all the stops? And Kramer says, well, yeah, people kept ringing the bell. So great. But this is really known for the scene where there's a fire in at the birthday party and George knocks over everyone. And then he tries to explain it. They're all outside, and the police officer or the fireman says, how do you live with yourself? And he says, it's not easy. This was Jon Favreau's television debut. He was the clown. And there was another thing where George could not believe nobody knew about Bozo the Clown. And at one point, Jon Favreau's character says, me? Forget it? You should forget it. You're living in the past, man. You're hung up on some clown from the 60s, man. So funny. And then George is explaining what happened, and Jerry said, so you feel women and children first in this day and age is somewhat of an antiquated notion. So basically it's every man, woman, and child and invalid for themselves. So good. Number 4, the soup Nazi from season 7. Everyone goes to this new soup stand because the soup is so great. Unfortunately, the owner is obsessed about his customers' ordering procedure. Jerry and his new girlfriend annoy everyone by using baby talk. Elaine buys an armoire and asks Kramer to watch it, but Kramer is robbed by some gay trash-talking street toughs. This is the soup Nazi episode, maybe the most famous thing ever from Seinfeld. There are so many famous things from Seinfeld, but everyone remembers the soup Nazi. Everyone still talks about the soup Nazi. No soup for you. It's so famous. I like when Newman orders, he orders jambalaya, and then he's walking out of there and he says jambalaya. Love that. This is also known as the episode where Jerry and his girlfriend just kept saying, "You're schmoopy. No, you're schmoopy. No, you're schmoopy." And it annoys George and Elaine so much. And then George and Susan are having lunch with Jerry and the girlfriend. And then George tries to do all the baby talk with stuff with Susan, and Susan loves it. So that was great. The whole thing with this is where I believe we see the first time we see the gay trash talking street toughs. I'm not a fan of them really, but okay. But they also appear when in that episode where Kramer wouldn't wear the AIDS ribbon. Who will not wear the AIDS ribbon? But here, yeah, they take the armoire. Okay, whatever. But this is just the whole concept of the soup Nazi, no soup for you, is just one of the most famous and biggest things from Seinfeld. So that's why it is number 4. Number 3, the opposite from season 5. George decides to turn his life around by doing the exact opposite of what he would usually do. Elaine is having a lot of bad luck, and Jerry keeps breaking even, and Kramer gets the coffee table book published. This is another amazing concept, right up there with the abstinence for George. And it's so rare to see George actually win for once on this entire series. I don't know how many episodes have we done, 160, 170, something like that. It's always George losing. Usually all the characters lose, but still, for once, George wins. And he just decides to do the exact opposite. And first, it starts by, instead of ordering tuna on rye toast or something like that, he orders chicken salad on plain bread or something like that. And Jerry says, chicken salad is not the opposite of tuna. Salmon is the opposite of tuna because salmon swim against the current and tuna swim with it. And George says, good for the tuna. Love that. Then Elaine points out that this beautiful woman is looking at George. And George says, Elaine, bald men with no jobs and no money who live with their parents don't approach strange women. But he decides to do the opposite, and he just says, I couldn't help but you notice me. He says, oh yeah, we ordered the same thing. And he says, my name is George. I'm unemployed and I live with my parents. And she's all interested. It's like, I'm Victoria. Hi. And it's so funny that line actually worked. Then basically everything Jerry does is even. He loses a gig and then immediately he gains one. Elaine throws $20 of his out the window and he immediately finds some. So it's like he's always even, Steven. Then Kramer tells Jerry that he's going to be on Regis and Kathy Lee to talk about his coffee table book about coffee tables. And I love that Jerry says, oh, I'll loan you my puffy shirt. So then we cut to George on this date with this woman, and he's still doing the opposite of everything. He gets cut off while driving, and instead of freaking out, he's like, "Nope, that's okay. But then they go to the movie theater, and there's these horrible kids or horrible teenagers or whatever kicking the seat and talking and disrupting everybody and just being horrible. And instead of doing nothing, George does the opposite, and he turns around. One of the greatest scenes, he says, you shut your trap and stop kicking the seats. We're trying to watch a movie. And if I have to tell you again, we're going to take it outside. I'm going to show you what it's like. You understand me? Now shut your mouth or I'll shut it for you. And if you think I'm kidding, just try me, because I would love it. Of course, I did that horribly, but still awesome scene. They're going back, and she says, well, why don't you come upstairs? Why don't you come in the apartment with me? And he turns her down, and she says, who are you, George Costanza? And he says, I'm the opposite of every guy you've ever met. Elaine, and then at the same time that George is going up, Elaine is going down. She starts the episode by getting a promotion because Pendant Publishing is about to be bought by some Japanese conglomerate, and she's about to get a promotion, and everything's going great. And she's going out with Jake Jarmel, and that's going wonderful. But she goes to meet him and at some restaurant, and they tell her, oh, it was actually like the movies, and they tell her he was in an accident, and she goes to the hospital. But before she goes to the hospital, she buys Juji fruits. And so she's at the hospital, and Jake Jarmel finds out that she bought Juji fruit. What? And he says, so you heard that I was in a car accident and decided to stop off for some Juji fruit? And she's like, well, the counter was right there. So good. It's almost like Juji fruit like destroyed her life. It was really weird, or at least in this episode it did. And then Kramer goes on Regis and Kathy Lee, and this is an amazing scene. I love this scene so much. Regis keeps saying, this guy's a little bonkos. Did I tell you this guy's bonkos? He kept saying the word bonkos, and apparently Regis actually hated that line, and he hated that nobody liked that he didn't get any reaction from that line. I'm not what exactly is bonkos. I don't know what bonkos is. Anyway, Kramer is talking to Regis and Kathy Lee, and he says, you see, the beauty of my book is if you don't have a coffee table, it turns into a coffee table. And he pulls out the legs and it turns into a coffee table. And the crowd, the Regis and Kathy Lee audience just goes crazy. The reaction is amazing. And that really, really makes the scene. I have no idea. As you could tell, I have a whole bunch of Seinfeld memorabilia, knickknacks, whatever. I have no idea why they never made a coffee table book about coffee tables. It would, if I would love a coffee table book that actually pulled out and became a coffee table. That would be amazing. I have no idea why they never actually made one. So now we cut to George. Victoria knows someone with the Yankees, and there's a position available. So he goes to interview with the Yankees. By the way, I just found this out. The guy interviewing him, he was the teacher from the Breakfast Club. How about that? Anyway, so he's interviewing him, and he's still doing the opposite thing, and he's telling him about all of his stupid jobs. He's like how he got fired from one job for sleeping with a cleaning lady. And then he meets George Steinbrenner, and this is the first time we see George Steinbrenner on the show. And he goes to meet him, and he says, but I must say, with all due respect, I find it very hard to see the logic behind some of the moves you have made with this fine organization. In the past 20 years, you have caused myself and the city of New York a good deal of distress, and we have watched you take our beloved Yankees and reduce them to a laughing stock, all for the glorification of your massive ego. And George Steinbrenner says, hire him. That was the first time that Larry David did the voice, and then somebody else did the physical stuff. But yeah, this is, I don't know, I guess now George Steinbrenner, nobody, he's not that big of a deal, but at the time it was a big deal. He was like one of the biggest figures in sports, so this was a huge deal. So George gets the job. He's telling Jerry, and Jerry says, Ruth, Gehrig, DiMaggio, Mantle, Costanza. Love that line. So now George is able to move out of his parents' house, which is nice, and they're all moving out, and George's parents are freaking out, and he pulls them aside. He says, I want you to both know how much you mean to me, and I love you very, very much. And Jerry and Kramer look at each other like, yeah, opposite. And at the end, so everything is going great for George, and everything is going terrible for Elaine because Mr. Lippman had a cold and he wouldn't shake the Japanese people's hands, so the deal was off. So Lippman Pendant Publishing was destroyed, all because Elaine had Juji fruits or something like that, and she's looking horrible. And she says, do you know what's going on here? Can't you see what happened? I've become George. And Jerry says, don't say that. It's true. I'm George. I'm George. It's like a horror movie or something like that. So good. Number 2, the subway from season 3. Everyone has an uncommon experience while going their separate ways on the subway. Kramer overheard a hot tip on a horse on his way to pay a traffic violation. This is just the quintessential Seinfeld episode. You know, if you've ever ridden a subway in New York, you could probably relate to anything that happened here. Almost, it is not the most pleasant experience. I liked it. I've been in New York a few times. I liked riding the subway, but then again, it could be scary, I guess. But so Jerry encounters a guy that loves getting naked. Jerry was sleeping when he wakes up. He's across the aisle from this naked guy. He was one of the voices in The Lion King. I think Pumbaa or something like that. Ernie Casella or something like that. So he becomes friends with the naked guy. Elaine is the best man at a lesbian wedding, which at the time was like very controversial. So that was funny. She's talking to some old lady, and she's saying that she's going to a wedding, and the lady keeps asking about it, and Elaine explains that it's a lesbian wedding and Elaine is the best man. And the lady says, my luck, I don't talk to a soul on the subway for 35 years. I get a best man at a lesbian wedding. And Elaine says, no, you don't understand. I'm not a lesbian. I hate men, but I'm not a lesbian. Great line. The thing with George meeting a beautiful woman, he's going for an interview. He meets a beautiful woman. He decides to forget about the interview and follow the woman, and she chains him. She handcuffs him to a bed and then takes all his clothes and money. And he says, no, wait, you can't just leave me here. And he says, will I see you again? Great. But my favorite plot is Kramer. He's going to pay traffic violations, but instead he gets a hot tip on a horse because the guy says, he overhears a guy saying, he's like, but it rained last night. Yeah, this horse loves a slop. It's in his bloodlines. His father was a mutter. His mother was a mutter. The guy says, his mother was a mutter? What did I just say? And then Kramer repeats the same thing to another guy. And apparently it's this huge long shot, and he puts all his money down and it wins. And then some guy sees that he just won a bunch of money, so he chases him to try to get the money. And this guy that was like looked like a hobo just trying to ask for money, a panhandler, is playing a violin. It was actually an undercover cop, and he saves Kramer, and the crowd cheers, which is kind of sitcom-y, but oh well. So yeah, it's basically the perfect Seinfeld episode. It's basically, it doesn't exactly dovetail. They don't, none of the plots, intersect or anything like that, which is the quintessential Seinfeld episode, but still 4 amazing stories. Just perfect. And now number 1, the contest from season 4. George's mother throws out her back when she falls down after catching George performing a personal act. The gang partakes in a contest of self-denial. This to me was a no-brainer. I remember when this first aired, that they aired thinking that they aired an episode about masturbation. Blew my mind. 30 years later, it still blows my mind that they would air an episode about, and the way they did it, the way they never mentioned masturbation. They use things like Master of My Domain and Lord of the Manor and stuff like that. Just brilliant, perfect writing, perfect execution, so many good scenes. It starts with they're all in the booth together. This is possibly the greatest scene of the entire series, when George says, my mother caught me. And they say, caught you? What, doing what? And he says, I was alone. He saw a Glamour magazine. And his mother catches him, and he says, I didn't know whether to try and keep her from falling or zip up. And Elaine says, well, what did you do? I zipped up. So she fell? Well, yeah, I couldn't run over the way I was. And so he says he'll never do it again. And Jerry says, oh, that's ridiculous. And they decide to have a bet over it. And then Elaine decides to get in, and they're like, oh, no women. There's no way women don't do it as often as men. And Jerry says, we have to do it. It's part of our lifestyle. It's like shaving. And Elaine says, oh, that's such baloney. I shave my legs. And Kramer says, not every day. The way he says not every day, like his mouth was full of food or something like that, was just perfect timing. Perfect. This is actually the first episode where we see George's mother, and she this might have been her best episode ever. And anything involving George's parents is great, but this might have been the greatest thing. So they decide to have this contest, and there's a naked woman across the street that is an apartment across the street. She's naked all the time, beautiful woman. Kramer sees this, goes to his apartment. Elaine comes in. Somebody counted 50 seconds it took for Kramer to come back, slams his money on the table, says, I'm out. Perfect. Just again, one of the great scenes of the entire series. So we cut to George. He is in the hospital. His mother's back went out, and his mother says, I go out for a quart of milk. I come home and find my son treating my body like it was an amusement park. My goodness. It was and the whole thing with Elaine and John F. Kennedy Jr. John Jerry is close to having sex with Marla the Virgin, but then she finds out about the contest and she freaks out, and Marla ends up with John. Just perfect. This is the perfect episode. It's such an amazing concept, and that's it. So there we go. There is the number one episode, and here's the top 10 episodes of Seinfeld. Thank you for watching and listening. Again, this has been one of the most fun things I've ever done. It has been such a joy watching about 15 episodes every week for the past 10-11 weeks. It has been amazing. It is a great show, so I've had so much fun. Stay tuned to see what I rank next. I think it's going to be The Office, so we'll see. All right, thanks everyone. Bye.